Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Emanuele Fabiani, and with me is Gabriele Franco. He's the CEO at Cassandra, and I'll leave the stage to him for a quick presentation.
Oh, thank you, Emma. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invite. I'm CEO and co-founder of Cassandra, a self-service marketing mix modeling tool to measure and optimize your media allocation to maximize revenue.
Very cool. And I'm the head of AI at xtream. We build services for scale-ups and corporates. So let me just have a quick check with my collaborators to see if everything is okay. Okay, everything is okay. Okay, because I was seeing like 0 attendees, which is kind of weird because one is here on my left. So there is probably something wrong in the attendee count. But anyway, we'll go ahead. So
Awesome.
today we will talk about marketing media mix models, why they're important for scale-ups and corporates, who should be interested in these tools, and what are the main steps for their adoption. We will also discuss real-world use cases and discuss the tips and tricks of implementing one of these tools and also the traps that we may encounter. So in order to begin, maybe we should have a quick discussion about what is a marketing media mix model, and then who should be interested in developing such an asset. So Gabriele, in 2 minutes, what is a marketing media mix model?
So I'll probably have a less technical view on it. You're probably way better with the technical explanation, but holistically, let's say you're a marketing manager and you invest in more than 2 or 3 marketing channels, and you have hard time understanding what is the incremental effects that each investment generate on your company. And you know that multi-touch attribution cannot do the work, cannot show the real picture of what's really happening. So you start thinking about external measurement system like marketing mix modeling that enables through statistics to understand what's the incremental ROI generated by online, offline, upper funnels, lower funnel campaigns all together. It enables you to have an holistic view of what's performing or what's not in your marketing mix. So you can actually take this insight and optimize your media mix. What's your explanation, Chris?
I like this. This is a very business-oriented explanation. I'm an engineer, so I would go for a more technical and mathematical description. I would say that a model is just a simplified view of the reality encoded in a mathematical function. And the marketing media mix model is a function that transforms investment into a sales KPI. So training a marketing media mix model means understanding how marketing investment in different channels, in different campaigns, impacts a sales KPI. So it's basically the same thing you said, just from a more engineering perspective.
Definitely. Love that.
So now that we know what is a marketing media mix model, let's discuss briefly why a company should be interested in developing such an asset, because it may be expensive. I know you make it more accessible, but it may be expensive to develop such an asset. So why investing in it? I mean, we can get attribution, we can get last touch attribution, so we know where our leads come from. Why do we need a complex statistical tool?
So this is a good question. And I know you have an answer too, but from my point of view, it happens when you're investing more than 30,000 euros a month in advertising, more or less. This is the benchmark in which it starts to become really useful. And your company's growth is based on how well you allocate your marketing investments across all the campaigns. And at one moment, because of privacy changes, because of cookies sunset, and all these and ad blockers and all these reasons that tools like multi-touch attribution are deprecated and do not show a real picture. Last click attribution is still really good, but only shows you the performances of the last step before the purchase happens. So you cannot know whether your upper funnel campaigns like Google Video, Facebook, TikTok perform altogether and how well they contribute to your sales. And if you cannot know, you cannot know how to optimize it and how and where to allocate more money in order to grow. So marketing mix modeling solves complexity. It solves all the complexity there is between analyzing the effectiveness of your media mix altogether and shows you just a picture of what you need to know. So what's the ROI? Where are the opportunities for growth? And how well you can allocate your marketing budget in the future.
Yeah,
What's your take on
that's.
that?
I mean, we're pretty much aligned. I would have said basically the same thing with different words. I mean, remember the picture of a function of something linking investment to sales. Well, if you link directly investment to sales, you do not need everything that is in between. Of course, multi-touch attribution was more precise. I wouldn't say more effective, but for sure it was more accurate because you could trace all the actions of different of each individual. The point is that you no longer can do that. So you're not allowed. Basically, the browsers will block you, and anyway, there are regulations against that. So uh, if you can just account for the last step, that's not enough. You would not be able to understand the awareness step, all the what you called upper funnel. That's exactly that. Um, and there is another point. Attribution works pretty well with online campaigns. How do you attribute a TV campaign? How do you attribute a radio campaign? How do you attribute an out of office campaign? You cannot do that. An out of home campaign, sorry. You cannot do that. So you need something else to be comprehensive in all your investment. And the idea of having a function linking directly investment to sales is very attractive because it looks like something complex, but in reality, it's a simplification. If you take away of the difficulty about statistics and modeling and so on, basically you have something to which you can tell how much you want to spend, and it tells you how good the results would be. So actually, it's a simplification in comparison with multi-step attribution. And there is more. This is a model, so it works in the past, but it does work on the future. So it allows you to basically create the budget of the next year, the next 3 months, the next month, without using additional tools because it's a basic feature of the device that you're using. Maybe let's talk a little bit about that. How can
Mhm.
marketing media mix help um, design marketing budgets? Because that's one of the features that our customers ask the most.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I have an experience with a lot of clients, but specifically there is one called Kuro Sweden, a direct to consumer brand that sells pillows and
Mhm.
uh, something to get to be warm in the bed, basically. And they wanted to internationalize while keeping efficiency with their market mix, investing also not only into digital channels but also into semi offline channel like influencers, radio, etc. And what they discovered is that Google search campaigns, even though the Google ad platform attributed a lot of sales to Google search, all these sales were not incremental, but the incrementality effect was driven by Google Video and was driven by other channels that were underperforming according to their platform. So what happened though, eh, they've switched, they moved budget from Google Search to Google Video, moved budget from the bottom of the funnel to the upper part of the funnel, and they've been able to increase uh, their revenue by 82%, the number of conversions by 82%, their cost per conversions decreased by 16%, and they've increased how much they were investing by 52%. So they were starting from a point in which they did not know where to allocate more money. And at the end, they were spending 50% more in advertising with a less cost per conversion. There's 16% loss per conversion, which worked really well.
Well, my question though is, could you have a similar result without marketing media mix? I mean, with just traditional data analysis and multi-touch attribution. I know, I mean, we know it's going to be deprecated, but you can still use it somehow. So is it really necessary to develop such a tool?
It becomes necessary when there is a high complexity. So I would say the more complexity there is, the more utility market mix modeling brings to the company. And in that particular case, they were investing more than 30K. And they wanted to actually improve their performances because they were blindfolded. They had some analysts inside that could not derive what was the incremental effect. Because keep in mind that multi-touch attribution or attribution in general do not measure incremental effects. They measure where users come from before buying, which is different from incremental measurements. Incremental measurements means I spend this and I get this in return. Well, if you measure where users came from, it doesn't show where you might be wasting your budget. So
that's an interesting point. I mean, from a statistical perspective, it is pretty obvious. I mean, all these models are additive, so they show how the effect of different channels add up and get to the overall effect on the sales KPI. But I mean, it's very important from a business and marketing perspective to underline this difference between what the insights that we can get from attribution and this kind of contribution to the overall results.
Exactly. And for me, it doesn't mean that you need to switch completely. To me, it doesn't make sense to switch. To me, what happens is we came from an era in which we believed that there was one single source of measurement for every objective that we have. Now it's not that anymore. It's impossible. You use last click attribution in order to measure and do CRO on the creatives or your ad on Google Ads, and you do A/B test on this to optimize your CTR and your conversion rate in your website. Well, for long-term optimization strategy at a monthly level, you want to use marketing mix modeling to actually model and see what's working and what's not. Every month, if there is uncertainty in the model, you can run incrementality tests. Incrementality tests are just A/B tests at a geographical base on where you invest in the same channel and where you don't invest. And after 1 month of testing, you can compare the change in sales that these regions generated to measure the incremental effect that generated. And all three, like it's called triangulation, measurement through triangulation. I think it's going to be the future for marketing measurement, which will give us a lot more work for us and for xtream too, because it's not easy to do.
No, definitely, but it has a lot of value. Maybe in order to make a good service to our audience, we should also talk very quickly about which company do not need to invest in marketing mix model, because I mean we are providing these services, so our interest in saying everybody should use it, but it's not the truth, right? I mean, there are lots of companies, probably most of the companies that do not need these devices, and so how can you trace the line? You said about 30,000 euros investment in a monthly marketing budget. Is there any other condition when a company should not really focus on this kind of platforms?
So I believe that if a company is really disciplined into keeping a low number of channels, let's say until you get to 30K, you have only Facebook. And then after 30K, you open Google search and maybe Google display simultaneously. And you can grow a lot without needing marketing mix modeling because your media mix is really simple. The reality, though, what happens in the market is after 30K, most of companies start having 3 or more marketing channels with 10 plus campaign type in their marketing mix. And there becomes the difficulty. So it's only when a marketing manager or marketing analyst cannot keep up with understanding what's driving incremental sales, because it needs to be a need, you can avoid it until the complexity becomes too difficult.
Understood. I mean, I would also maybe add another point. I mean, it's completely true, even in my experience, that marketing media mix models um, are meaningful above a certain amount of investment. I would maybe put the bar even a little bit higher. I would say above 500,000 per year. Um,
Mm.
yeah, because you know, uh, again, the point is these tools make sense when a person cannot manage the complexity and you need statistics. Um, Usually, a company first needs to understand what really works. And to understand what it really works, you can use classic A/B testing. Classic A/B testing does not work anymore when, again, when there are too many variables to perform a controlled experiment test. And then you need models to tell you um, which, which button changed which result. So um, that's probably the most important red line to cross. But it's also a matter of data and mindset. Mindset is very important because if you invest in such a tool, then you need to have confidence in what the model is telling you. If you buy such a marketing mix model and then you still follow your intuition and not uh, the the data and the insights that the model is providing you, it's basically wasted money. It does not make any sense. If you think your intuition is better than the model, no need for the model to be there. And also the data is very important. I mean, for the basic marketing media mix model, you just need investment and sales KPI, but you need a good history. I mean, if you have just 3 months, it's not gonna be enough. I mean, you can train the model, but then you cannot trust it. Uh, I think that if you have weekly data, the the lowest amount of historical depth that you need is probably in the range of 2 years. And mm, because many companies have yearly seasonalities. So in order to account for this seasonal effect, you need to estimate it. In order to estimate it, you need at least a couple of years. Otherwise, you are just not able to. So I would say that there are at least three um, conditions that need to be met in order for a marketing media mix project to be any to be helpful for a company, in a high enough marketing investment, a a good data-driven mindset, and enough data that are already collected when uh, the model starts its development. Don't know if you agree with that, Gabriel.
100% actually. You said it better than me. You can start with A/B test. Also, it's true. You don't need marketing mix modeling. And also, one thing that you said is that actually starting from A/B tests or geographical testing, whatever, really interesting because they demonstrate causality and non-correlation, which are the most scientific way of measuring an incremental effect. So it's actually really interesting. And then after the A/B test, you can use Bayesian models or frequentist models, marketing mix models to calibrate the marketing mix model before training. So everything connects to each other for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And also, before developing a proper model, I mean, many relevant insights can be just derived from exploratory analysis. I mean, if you perform like a cross correlation analysis between the marketing investment and the sales KPI, you can understand the correct timing of your investment. I mean, every retail firms and e-commerce firms want the marketing to be most effective during the Black Friday week. Okay, good. But how much in advance do you need to start posting on Instagram or Facebook uh, in order for that effect to be the most during the Black Friday week? It's not probably during that week that you should promote your post. It's before that week. How much before? Is it 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? You don't need a model to tell you that. Exploratory analysis is enough. And also, I mean, is your marketing most effective during summer or during winter? For a travel company, that's very important. And you don't need a model to understand that. So the the suggestion, at least from an engineering point of view, then Gabriele, you will tell me if you agree. From a marketing point of view, is start with the simple things because they provide you with the most value with the lowest expense. So why start with a huge investment? Huge, I mean, with a significant investment in a model um, when you can get the same, or I mean, not the same, but when you can get the first results directly from analyzing the data.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you can start from analyzing data, but from my experience, every company has the same problem. It's not about how you process the data, but actually how you collect it and
Yeah,
how easy it is for the company. So um, even though there are tools like Supermetrics, Funnel.io, DataDo, etc., it's not automatic to have everything centralized, cleaned, and refreshed every day or every week or every month. It's really difficult to have this structure inside of the company. So before stepping in into the statistics and complex analysis, the first step that I would suggest to anyone is just create a system to centralize your data, to have control over your data, to be sure that every single data point is clear and right, and you don't have format errors. And you can see all your KPIs in one dashboard with that data. After that, once you've controlled for descriptive analytics, you can start with diagnostic analytics and prescriptive, which both are marketing mix modeling or incrementality tests for sure.
definitely. I mean, again, it may be of interest to our audience to discuss quickly the best practices and the worst mistakes that you have seen in data gathering. I mean, assume that I am a customer of yours and I want to start building a marketing media mix model, but I don't have any data set yet. What would you suggest me to do?
So we have this problem with everyone, and we solved it. We're trying to solve it, and the way we solve it is we embedded our ETL API connectors inside of our platform. So for all the online digital channels, you can just click on button and authenticate, and in 1 hour, all the data is collected, and the data set is created automatically. And then you can modify it with some rules. For all the offline channels, now you can upload a CSV file in which you drag and drop inside and automatically attached and append the new columns to the data set. Now, we've seen horrible scenarios in which there are exports that are formatted with commas versus other exports that are formatted with points, or dates that have not date value but have other values, and everything is embedded, and all the values are extremely weird and extremely dirty in terms of what they represent. So it's taking into account the formatting, taking into account validating your data to be sure that the insights and the sum of all the records that you have in your Facebook ads export match with the spend that you actually had in the platform. It's essential, because if you start doing the model with wrong data, it's useless. It just shows you a different picture of what versus what really happened. So this is my experience. Curious to know what has been yours with your projects.
Oh, usually we are more lucky than you, because probably we work with more structured companies that already have some kind of data lake and some kind of structured data set for the data. So usually this step is quite is not as painful for us. The problem is more structuring the data set in the right way. I mean, to associate with every time range, the
Mm-hmm.
campaign that is in progress, the investment on each channel and on each campaign, and so on. I mean, the data are there, but the structure is usually not entirely clear and needs to be cleaned a little bit. So maybe on this topic, I mean, the first couple of hints that we can give our audience is, first, collect the data, because sooner or later you will need it. I mean, it's not a
For
matter
sure.
of if, it's a matter of what. If your company goes well, if your company grows, then you will regret a lot not having those data in 6 months or in a year in the future. So start collecting data immediately, even if you're not using them. I mean, imagine you're spending 20K per month. You don't need a marketing mix model. You maybe don't even need A/B testing. You can rely on gut feeling, but the data are, I mean, are an asset already. Uh,
That's true.
what happens if in 1 month you want to look back and assess what worked and what didn't? If you don't have the data, you cannot do it. So if you don't collect the data immediately, you're preventing you from achieving value in the future, which is pretty stupid, I would say, even because um, it's not that hard to collect the data nowadays. Every platform has easy tools to download the data, and you have lots of connectors. You have one in Cassandra, but there are also other services that provide the same features. So it's kind of
Yeah.
easy to have a good data set.
I mean, to give
Yeah,
some context is I worked with in a marketing agency with some client with a lot of clients that were spending less, and the utility of centralizing the data is just to unlock some scenarios. So unlock a lifetime value, unlock LTV over customer acquisition cost metric, unlock last click attribution, matching the ID, the transaction ID from Google Analytics with the Shopify, for example, to see really what is the last click attribution, and analyzing the cohorts. All these is only unlocked when you centralize everything. And in order to centralize everything, maybe there are some tools that I can share. It might be useful. If you want to go with quality and user experience, there are Supermetrics and Funnel.io. There are incredible tools, simplify everything. And you, even though you're not a technical person, you can do that. Then there is Datadoo. It's a little more technical, but it allows, and Datadoo and Stitch Data. You need to be a little more complex, a little more technical, but they have lower costs. So if you want to spend a little less, you can go with those two.
cool. Maybe let's take one step further. So we discussed which companies should be interested in marketing media mix models, which shouldn't. We discussed the data set, how to collect. Actually, one more question about the data set. I've told my opinion, but I'm also interested in yours. How much data is needed to start developing a marketing media mix model, in your opinion?
So at least if you want to model seasonality, you said it correctly, at least 2 years. With 1 year, you can. It doesn't work. You don't. The way you model seasonality is you model the patterns that repeat every year. So you need more than one record in order to detect a pattern. We have a rule, and this rule says that we need to have at least 10 records for each variable that we insert in the model. I don't know if it's generally for all data science, but
No,
for
it's
regression
not. But
analysis.
no, it's not general. I mean, it varies a lot with the context and with the kind of model that you use. But I also think that's a very good rule of thumb for the marketing media mix model
So
sector. It
e-
works.
exactly, and it will mean that if you have 2 years of data, you can have only 10 factors inside of your model, 10 variables. If you have three, you can have 15. If you have daily data and you have 2 years, you can have a lot of variables. And there is a question here, Gianluca, that says, if we have, does it make sense to build a marketing mix model if your offline investments on TV and radio are just one flight, 1 week or 2 weeks per year? Because this is another thing that we need to consider about statistical significance of all the variables that are in your marketing mix. What's your take on that?
Um, I mean, it's complicated because um, one of the issues that we have sometimes with our customers is that it's something like this, a little bit less extreme, but the problem is you have a particular campaign, maybe a particular TV commercial that runs only for 2 weeks, and you have weekly data. So it's 2 data points only for that campaign. It doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't work because with 2 data points and one variable, the model can easily overfit. That is, can easily memorize exactly what happened in those specific 2 weeks, and but this has no general value for what may happen in the future. So both the explanatory power and the predictive power of the model is basically zero, even though the model looks good because on the training set is perfect. So that's actually a trap that you can easily fall into. If you have too few data for too many variables, the model will look perfect after training, but it will have no predictive power. So um, actually, my suggestion is to try and have series that are as complete as possible. I mean, if you have very short campaign, do not model the campaign. You will not be able to just model the type of the campaign. Maybe you can easily group several campaigns into just one category and use that category as a variable. So I would say that probably the answer to Gianluca's direct question is no. But maybe if you can group this advertising into categories, and maybe that category runs for 6 months over a year, that is doable.
Right,
You
right.
agree?
But yes, partially, because
Mm.
what I see really often is that all the other channels, maybe I aggregated everything at a campaign type level, and all the channels run every year, every week, etc. So I have really a lot of consistency. But there are some channels like TV that are run just 2 or 3 weeks a year, and we have 6 data points in total. So what happens is, right, I create a marketing mix model, which it's pretty robust for most of the year, but doesn't get the right positive spike in the period in which we invest in TV, for example. And what happens as an output is that the confidence intervals of the coefficients, so the ROIs, which are mostly the same thing, will show what are the channels that have low uncertainty versus the one that have high uncertainty with a really wide confidence interval. So, I mean, it's true. I agree when you say if you have a lot, few records per a lot of variables, it doesn't make sense. But if you have just one variable that has low frequency, maybe it can still generate, probably can still generate utility, take into account the uncertainty that the marketing mix model can have.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense if you have just one such variable, maybe two if you have a long enough series. Also, another thing that you can, another weapon that you can use in such a situation is feeding the model with a priori knowledge. If you use a Bayesian approach, you can use priors in order to tell the model what you expect to be true and ask the model to correct it with evidence and not to infer everything from evidence. So, for example, if you know that the customer acquisition cost with TB spots is in the range 300 to 500 euros per customer, you can tell that to the model. And the model then will infer the best value, but in that range. Why would you do that? Why can't you just let the model do its own things? Because it's hard to learn. So if you let the model learn everything from the data, it will learn everything in a worse way. If you give some boundaries to the model, whatever freedom you provide the model with those boundaries, within that freedom, the model will be much more effective in learning what it can. So that's also a possibility that should be considered.
For sure.
Okay,
Great.
so um, following our path towards
Mm-hmm.
building of an MMM model, uh, we know when to build it. We have the data set. Now what? I would talk a little bit about exploratory analysis and what you can try before going to the model itself. So what are the 2 or 3 charts that you would always suggest doing?
Oh, this is an awesome question. So first thing, anomalies detection. So I want to be sure that all my variables have true data inside. So if I have some outliers that actually goes from, I don't know, spending 100, 500 euros a day, and one record shows me that I'm spending 50K, probably doesn't make sense. Probably it's an error. So I want to check that. Second thing that I check is multicollinear effects. And multicollinear effects are the nightmare of any marketing mix modeler, I think. And to keep it simple and a simple explanation, it means that every time you invest more money into Facebook, you increase the marketing budget also on Google search, for example. And if you did this, if you apply this behavior every time you varied one budget versus another, and then moved always together, the model cannot know which one of between Facebook and Google had the incremental impact of how to differentiate them. It will only know what's the aggregate impact that these two had in your marketing mix. And you need to check for multicollinear effects every time before building a model, because you need to take into consideration what are the risks of actually modeling these two features. And one way or another, there are 3 methodologies that apply to solve it. First one is aggregating the 2 variables if it's possible. Let's say, for example, it's Facebook prospecting and Facebook retargeting. You can aggregate them. If you cannot aggregate them, we suggest in one channel it's spending really not a lot. Like, for example, 5% of what the other channel is spending. Suggest to remove the variable. Or optimal scenarios is what Emanuele was doing, what you were doing, Emanuele. So giving priors, calibrating the model with some insights, some behavior. And one last thing that I would want to check is lag effects. So I want to automatically check the lag and the difference in time there is between the Black Friday and when I should actually spend the money, for example. Or the difference between there is when I spend and when I get the effect from the spending for each channel. How about you?
That makes a lot of sense. I will answer you, but I have another question for you before taking the answer. That is, why is it that in marketing it is so common and so natural to have multicollinearity?
Oh. So from experience, so usually marketing budgets are managed by marketing agency, and by the volumes of these budgets are managed by the CFO. is going to allocate and distribute his budget across the year. And what happens is during high demand season, all marketing agencies and all marketing teams tend to invest more money into all the channels simultaneously to increase and capitalize on all the demand that increases, and try to decrease it when there are low demand season because they don't want to waste their budget. And even though they're technically they make sense, um, there needs to be variance inside of their data, inside of the spend volume over time compared to other spend to other channels in order to measure correctly the impact of this channel.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's an effect that we found as well. I mean, we developed the MMM model for We Road, which is
Mhm.
the probably the coolest travel company in
It
Italy.
is.
Um, the problem is that, of course, their marketing investment follows the demand. So basically, they want the maximum effect of their marketing campaigns to happen when um, people are more inclined to book trips. That is before the summer and before the winter break, but it's more before the summer. So they increase spending on all platforms in the same time. And the problem is that it makes sense from a business perspective because they go and intercept the demand. But this is a nightmare for us data scientists and engineers because, I mean, it's exactly as you said, the model has no way to differentiate the effects of investment in one channel and on the other. So um, that's a real problem, and it deserves a follow up. But I owe you an answer about the main chart to plot during the exploratory analysis. I would go for cross correlation between time
Mhm.
series that gives you the lag effect. So it tells you how much before you should invest in a channel to have an effect on a specific time on the sales KPI. I would also give some credit to the good old scatter plots, because if you plot investment on one channel against the sales KPI, you can see a lot. You can see saturation effects. You can see different patterns between the seasons. You can see also, if you complicate the plot a little bit and you maybe use color to denote another variable, you can see interaction effects. And that, uh, I mean, this is an insight in I mean, independently from whether you're building a model or not, but this is also very interesting for the modeling phase. Um, and maybe the third one is an ad stock chart. Stock is a
Hmm.
transformation that takes care of the cumulative effect of investment, because basically the point is, if you see one Instagram post and then another, the effect in brand awareness and in top of mind effect adds up. So stock is a transformation that takes care of this, and its chart, the chart of the ad stock transformed investment against the sales KPI, can tell you a lot about how much the effect on a specific channel adds up over time. I mean, in some channel, the effect adds up a lot. In some other, it doesn't. The classical example is Instagram against Google search. In Instagram, the effect adds up a lot because the more posts you see, the more interesting and cool the brand looks. Um, while on Google search, it doesn't really matter a lot.
True.
We were talking about collinearity. So
Mhm.
what's the remedy to that?
So ideally, if you have multicollinearity and you don't have priors, so because you can have priors and you can calibrate with your beliefs what's happening. So where there are multicollinearity, it's because consumer use different media channels at the same time. Radio. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. It
this
makes
is very
sense.
correct. Yeah.
But generally speaking, if you don't have calibration data, because you don't trust your attribution data in order to calibrate your market mix model, and you have multicollinear effects, and you cannot drop one column, one variable, and you cannot aggregate them, the next most useful thing that you can do is you run an incrementality test. With this incrementality test, let's say you're in Italy and you invest and you want to validate the incremental effects of Google search. What you do is you stop spending Google search in Lombardia, Lazio, and Sicily, group of regions that is statistically significant. And what you do is you measure what happens in the next days to the sales of Lombardia, Sicily, and Lazio compared to the rest of Italy. And if there is a really high decorrelation effects, we can see with difference between these two decorrelation, we can measure the incremental effects, and you actually use this insight to calibrate the model and remove the multicollinear effect. That's what I would do.
I will show the question by Ankit from LinkedIn because it's very interesting. So the question is, how do we handle multicollinearity effect for a Bayesian model like MCMC, Monte Carlo Markov chain? We are currently using prior knowledge for our variables to account for the right distribution of variables, also hoping that it would help somewhat with regularization. Any other thoughts or idea on how to handle multicollinearity any other way? So that's exactly what we did for We Wrote. So the point is that classical frequentist models were a little bit I mean, they weren't enough to handle multicollinearity. I mean, they were still good in the out-of-sample prediction, but the explanation was not satisfactory at all. With Bayesian models, you can inject prior knowledge in the form of prior distribution. So you can impose, for example, that the customer acquisition costs are never negative. You can impose that they are within a certain range. You can impose that their probability distribution have a certain shape. So if you have such prior knowledge available, it's a waste not to use it. I mean, it helps a lot. Actually, the only way to properly and scientifically get rid of the problem with multicollinearity is that it's not a modeling issue. It's the real world that it is that way. So I mean, reality is something that is very difficult to argue against. So there is no easy way to get rid of multicollinearity. The only scientifically accurate way of overcoming this issue is to perform controlled experiments, as Gabriele said before. But if you tell a company that it needs to change its marketing budget allocation just to calibrate your model, then you may have a very tough time talking with someone. I don't know
Yeah,
what's your
definitely.
experience, Gabriele, but it's not easy.
Yeah, there is this taboo about the concept of all the companies that I've encountered over time. They wanted to spend money to generate results. And if you tell them that you're not sure about the results that they generate, and you need to spend money to measure the results, they step back. Then they say, what the fuck? Why should I invest 1 month budget and risk it just to measure and see whether it has impact? And my answer is always, because you're probably unsure about whether it has impact or not. So it becomes really, I believe they were missing some culture about this, because as I mentioned before, we come from an era in which we had the illusion of measuring everything with one free tool. And I use the terms illusion because it was an illusion. But right now it's not possible. Right now you need to actually spend and invest resources just to measure, because measure is not easy. For sure.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, there is this a very hard thing to explain, that sometimes you make experiment and you lose money today in order uh, to gain awareness of your results and to gain much more in the future. But that's a future gain and an immediate loss, and we know that people do not like that.
True, for sure. For sure, 100%. This is the human bias altogether with a data-driven solution.
Yeah, but actually, Ankit, to give you the final answer, if you want to get rid of multicollinearity the scientific way, the only tool that you have is to perform a controlled experiment. Can you do that? I don't know. Good luck. So we have 10 minutes. So I would try to be as concrete as possible. And let's say we are now, we have completed the data exploration phase. It's time to build a model. So what are
Mhm.
the steps, the very practical steps that a company interested in building an MMM should follow, in your opinion?
Do you mean in terms of what are the tools and the options in the market, or
Yeah,
specifically what
exactly.
is the
I
procedure?
mean, assume that I am a CMO and I have
Mhm.
read about marketing media mix models. I probably do not have an engineering background, so I'm not going
Mhm.
to open a Colab notebook and code a model from scratch with PyMC. What should I do?
So, so I would do this type of selection tree. So, first, first question: do you have a technical team inside? So if you have a technical team inside, you can probably start with building your marketing mix model with an open source library. That is Facebook Robin, Lightweight MMM, or Orbit, or PyYMC Marketing, which is an amazing open source library. If you don't have an internal marketing science team, a technical team, you have two options. Whether you buy it from an agency or a AI designer like Xtream, or you build it internally with a SaaS tool that is built for non-technical people like Cassandra.
Like Cassandra, yeah, exactly.
and and from there, or you have another option, which is you can build it with Excel, and there are some tutorial videos on YouTube on how to do it with Excel. Though it's kind of risky doing with Excel because it has really big constraints on what you can do actually. So if you want just to learn with yourself, just to understand how they work, you can start with Excel. But then I suggest you to try one of these options that I shared with you. And the process is the following: you need to get the data in. You need to define what are the hyperparameters for add stock and diminishing returns. Calibrate with prior knowledge, and then start the training. This is usually the procedure that everyone follows. One thing that I want to mention though, it's really rare to do one iteration, one training, and then get an optimal result. It's never the case. You usually need to, it's a procedure built in loops in which you do a first iteration, you train the model and you see the results and you see where your marketing mix model does not perform really well. And from these insight, you iterate and you recalibrate the model with new hyperparameters, different priors, or different features, different variables that you insert in the model in order to solve the problems that you saw in the first iteration. And we do it every three times at least in order to get a robust model that actually works. Um, what's your experience, Emma?
Oh, basically the same. I mean,
Hmm.
actually, what you said is true for any machine learning
Okay.
project. It's never going to work the first time. I mean, not even the engineers at OpenAI were able to make
Mhm.
GPT-4 work at the first trial, and they are much better. I mean, they're one of the best research teams in the world, and they spend lots of iterations in improving their models. So it's always this way. I mean, you try with a first model. It works somehow, but it doesn't work on a specific time ranges. Time ranges. The coefficients of specific variables are not meaningful, and so on. And then you iterate on what you understand is not right. Here, a key point is evaluating the goodness of your model. So you need to have very clear in mind what is the key metric to use in order to understand if the model is good enough to be used for business decisions or it needs a little bit more fine tuning. What's your take on that, Gabri?
Oh, so this is a evaluating and validating the model is one of the biggest questions that is out. So what I do is, what we measure is first, train test split data set to validate the robustness on non-seen data, non-trained data, and how well it can predict the future. We use 3 metrics in order to evaluate accuracy and robustness. Actually, 4. The first one is R-square and nominal root mean squared error together to measure what's the error over time and what's the how much percentage of the variation in the output variable are described by the variation in the input variables. Then we have a metric called decompare SSD. Decompare SSD measures the difference between the effect share and the spend share of a single channel. And it needs to be lower than 50%. It doesn't need to be really low, but it needs to be lower than 50%. Then we have calibration error. We want to get the model that has the highest accuracy with my beliefs. And lastly, I want to use confidence intervals of the ROIs or cost per conversions in order to evaluate what is this level of certainty that each variable has. And what I do, I have a little function that measures everything together and evaluate what is the best model between all my iterations and what I should choose. It's just a grading system. How about you?
That makes a lot of sense. I also like to add a little bit of human inspection of the out of the model, because you learn a lot by looking at the coefficients of the model, because basically the inverse of the customer acquisition cost
Sure.
on the channel compensated for transformation of the variables. Also, another thing that it's very important to check is how much the actual value of the sales KPI, that is the target of your model, is within the prediction intervals of your model itself. Because, I mean, there is no way your model is going to be correct always. But if your model has learned when it's going to be more confident and less confident, that's a very good good thing, and that's a very good information to have. So the idea is that about 90% of the time, the actual value should be inside your 90% prediction interval. And I use the word prediction interval and not confidence interval because I've mainly in mind the Bayesian models, but you can do the same, of course, for frequencies approach. So I think this this last part of evaluating the model and assessing which model is the best and if it is good enough for being adopted in a business decision is often overlooked. I mean, people think that then once they have the model, everything is done, but no, it isn't. I mean, if you have a model but you don't trust it, it's worthless. It's actually counterproductive because we have wasted effort and money in something that you're not using. So I think
Actually,
that's very important.
good point on the confidence interval that you shared, and for sure the prediction. Awesome. I didn't imagine that because low. We didn't do a lot of Bayesian, but that's really interesting.
Okay, so now actually I have one last question that it may be worth discussing now. That is, both xtream and Cassandra build marketing media mix models, but they build them in a very different way. So Cassandra is basically a tool where you can build your own model, self-service, connecting your own data sources and doing everything without any required technical knowledge. Xtream, on the other hand, builds models from the ground up, uh, providing advisory in building the data set, performing exploratory analysis, building the model, and deploying it on either our infrastructure or our client's infrastructure. So it's basically a buy versus make approach. Um, when should a company choose the buy opportunity, and when should it go for the make approach, in your opinion?
To me, depends mainly on so marketing mix modeling is difficult. It's really, really difficult. It doesn't require only statistical skills. It requires also coding skills and marketing skills all together in one person or a team that it needs to work in the same project. And you need to gather the data and you need to work manually a lot of difficult and delicate steps. So what I suggest is if the company is growing really rapidly and it has a really complex marketing mix and needs to optimize it in like really optimize it in a custom made way and wants to delegate that part to experts, probably an extreme approach is the best one. Well, if you want to build it, if you want to have everything inside of your company, and you want to be able to analyze your data without sharing it with third-party agencies, or you want to actually have it everything inside, and you want to be fast at your own pace, do the velocity that you're comfortable with, you can use a tool like Cassandra that then finalizes and streamline all the procedure for you, automating most of the parts. Keep in mind though, we are not custom made. Cassandra is not custom made. So if your marketing mix has some peculiarities, like for example, um, I don't know, a lot of variables that are multicollinear, a lot of complexity, a lot of budget invested in a really weird pattern, probably you need a custom made approach. If your marketing mix has complexity, but you want to do everything internally and you want to do it at your own pace, probably Cassandra is the best option. This is my take.
I agree.
You
I
think?
definitely agree. And I would add also another perspective that is, again, the scale of your marketing investments. Because, I mean, building a tailor-made marketing media mix model is not cheap. It's going to be expensive, but it's also a high return activity. So it can save you an awful lot of money in savings and in more effective marketing investment. Um, the point is, if your investment is closer to 350,000 euros per year, or even 500,000 per year, or also a little bit more, um, do you really need a tailor-made model?
Hmm.
Is the return over investment justifying the expense? Not sure. But if you're spending multiple millions, uh, and if you're spending multiple millions, chances are that you are doing that over online and offline channels with very specific features that are dictated by your own business, which is already large and well developed. Then it makes a lot of sense to go for a custom approach. So if at the very beginning of this webinar, you were thinking why two companies that are providing the same service and that should really be looked as competitor are here discussing the topic together, is because we are serving different markets and there is basically no competition among us. We do the same thing for different targets.
True.
Um, I don't know, Gabby, if you want to add something to this discussion.
I believe you shared everything in the better than I would ever explain it. So no, I don't feel that there is anything to add. I believe.
Very good. So maybe we can answer a couple of questions. We are running out of time, but I would anyway do that because we had received many. So I will get some of these. For instance, we have this question from Davide. Have you
Mm-hmm.
found just the way for accounting for the effects of upper funnel channels on lower funnel ones in MMM? For
Oh
example,
yeah.
through hierarchical models. Interesting.
Oh, I've tried them. Have you?
Yes, we did. Bayesian hierarchical models are great. PyMC has good support for them. Basically, you have both intermediate and final nodes. The final nodes is what you want to predict. The intermediate nodes are kind of outputs of simpler models that become inputs of, outputs of lower level models that become inputs of higher level models. Uh, there is a whole branch of scientific literature that talks about that, and PyMC gives lots of primitives to build such models. Um, the problem is, though, that they are much more complex, and
I was
sometimes
waiting
you
for it.
find Yeah, sometimes you find issues in the training, like non-convergence of sampling chains. So your data need to be very good to make good use of these models. I would say that, again, if you are a small company, just go for the input-output approach, investment, sales KPI. You shouldn't care about this issue. If you are spending multiple millions in marketing investment per year, then it starts to make sense to go for a hierarchical approach, because again, you have better insights, but the price to pay is more complexity and more issues during the model development process.
Definitely agreed. Uh, when I tried them, usually the accuracy went up, but the task to interpret the results, interpret the contribution that they had on the sales, they're really, really difficult. And I don't believe that most companies, unless they have a really complex marketing mix with a really long customer sales cycle, generally speaking, I don't believe that they need a really hierarchical model. You can model the ad stock to have lag effects, to have delayed effects over between the moment in which you invest and the moment in which you see the impact, and then the halo effect right afterwards. So you can model with a standard marketing mix model a lag effect for to measure the contribution of upper funnel campaigns versus lower funnel. And usually you get pretty nice results, results that actually work if they're applied.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a very good. Uh, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's called the KISS rule. Keep it simple,
Hmm.
stupid. I never
Oh,
understood why that they put stupid as the last word, but probably they had a couple of S's, so they needed to use both of them.
yeah.
But I agree. Start simple.
The first time I've heard the thing, it was in The Office. It was Dwight mentioning. Have you ever watched The Office?
No,
Oh,
never
right.
watched that.
Suggestion for everyone here: what The
Uh,
Office.
Simone here is staring at me. Probably he watched it probably several times. But anyway, let's go to another question. Um, oh, this is interesting. Time varying coefficients.
Yeah. So my take is really simple. Even though I believe this is the future of marketing mix modeling, Orbit KTR does not have a uh, sufficient simple user experience to build a model that justifies uh, using it. So even though modeling coefficients based on the seasonality effects, it actually makes a lot of sense. The output from output orbit, it's really, really difficult. It's really, really worse than other open source library like PyYMC, Robin, or Lightweight MMM. So this is because it's not built for marketing mix modeling, and on top of it, you need to create diminishing returns and outstock effects manually on top. It makes it extremely a horrible customer experience because thesis has been built not for marketing mix modeling but for time series forecasting. So it's good. I think it's the future, but the user experience needs some iteration in order to be applied to the masses. PyYMC marketing is going to have time vary coefficients. I don't know with kernel-based time vary models, but probably another methodology, but they have a way better user experience.
Yeah, PyNC marketing is really good, and also it has the support by PyMC Labs that is providing consulting services on top of the library, so they have a strong incentive to keep on the development. And I mean, great developer experience. Everyone in the audience willing to build their own marketing media mix model should really consider this library. It's free, it's open source, so you pay nothing for using it. About this question, I have a time series forecasting background. Time series forecasting is what my PhD was about. But in this specific scenario, I find that, I mean, kind of same discussion that you, Gabriele, did for hierarchical models. The complexity is not repaid by the gain in accuracy and in the goodness of fit of the model, at least in the use cases that that you experimented. Also, dynamic coefficients, time varying coefficients, again, make the model much more complex and more data hungry as well, because if you need to estimate coefficients that are varying over time, you need more data.
For sure.
There was another question, the last one that I would like to answer. That was about the data availability. Let me look for it here. So there are a lot of data, especially on trade and promotions, done at store level, which is difficult to collect. That is true. I mean, if you run a retail business, of course, you have promotion at every store, and they're kind of difficult to collect and manage. But usually, if you are a large retailer, you also operate at a scale where you have the infrastructure to collect this data. It's not always the case that you do, but you could and you probably should. Again, a model is not the real world. You do a model to simplify the real world. So maybe just providing some idea, you can model each and every store as just one huge equivalent store with a promotion level that is the weighted average of the promotions applied in each store. This way you simplify a lot your problem, and you do not need to create a model for each store, which is kind of very difficult when you have hundreds of or thousands of them. Don't know what is your opinion on this, Gabriele?
I agree completely. I mean, sometimes it happens that we have clients that, I mean, not clients. There are use cases of market mix modeling is if you have an e-commerce and you have also retail distribution, and you want to measure the ROI not only on e-commerce but also in offline, so you can actually validate as a marketing agency that it makes sense to invest this money even when it's sunny outside. Because what happens is when it's raining outside, your ads work really well. When it's sunny, people are outside buying from the store directly for your experience, and they need to. This variance is not described by the model usually, but if you aggregate everything, you can actually describe it and see what's the overall ROI contribution in all the company when you're doing advertising. So it is useful, but it's used to simplify reality, as you said. So you can
Yeah.
aggregate everything into one output variable and you're done. You cannot die from complexity while building a model that needs to solve complexity. So
Yeah, I mean, with this conclusion, I think that we are done for this webinar. We are running a quarter of an hour overtime, but I think that it was very interesting to discuss these topics. So Gabriele Franco is the CEO at Cassandra. Cassandra is a tool to simplify and democratize the opportunity of building marketing media mix models. If you haven't already, check out their website. It's super cool. And feel free to follow Gabriele on LinkedIn because he shares a lot of super interesting resources about marketing media mix. I'm Emanuele Fabiani. I'm also the CEO, but it doesn't really matter. I'm the head of AI at xtream, and we provide services. We build AI and machine learning systems for scale-ups and corporates. If you want, feel free to follow me as well on LinkedIn. I do not share content only on marketing media mix models, but I cover AI and machine learning more in general. And for sure, feel free to get in touch if you are interested in the topic of this webinar. Gabriele, thank you again.
thank you a lot, Emma. It's been a pleasure.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye bye.